The open highway has always been a place of freedom, of escape, of endless horizons. But sometimes, the road leads us to more than just destinations. It brings us face to face with the feelings we've been trying so hard to avoid. This is the story of two women whose paths collided on a lonely stretch of asphalt, where sparks ignited and secrets could no longer be hidden. It is a tale of longing, of courage, and of a love that society might never fully understand. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss the emotional twists and turns of stories like this, stories that will stay with you long after the final words are spoken. Tonight, you'll discover what happens when desire refuses to stay silent on the road, and when two women realize that the most dangerous journey isn't on the highway, it's the one into each other's hearts. I had been driving for hours, the desert stretching endlessly in front of me, heat waves blurring the horizon into something that looked more like a dream than a place. My old pickup truck rattled on every bump, and the sound of the engine was the only companion I had left after weeks of drifting. I told myself I was escaping something, though if I was being honest, I was just running from myself. It was late afternoon when I saw her. A figure standing on the side of the road, a backpack slung over her shoulder, her thumbs stretched out in that universal gesture for help. Hitchhikers weren't something I usually picked up, especially not in the middle of nowhere, but there was something about her. Maybe it was the way the fading sun caught the strands of her dark hair, making them glow almost copper. Maybe it was the way she stood, confident, unafraid, as if she knew the world owed her a ride. I slowed the truck, my heart strangely pounding as I rolled down the window. "Where you headed?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She leaned in, and that was the first time I saw her eyes, green, sharp, almost too intense to look at for long. "As far as you're going," she said with a smirk that tugged at the corner of her mouth. Something inside me jolted. Against every cautious bone in my body, I unlocked the door. She climbed in, dropping her backpack at her feet. "Thanks," she added, her voice smooth, low, with a rhythm that made me feel like I was already in trouble. "My name's Claire," I said, keeping my hands tight on the steering wheel. "Eva," she replied, as if the name itself carried a weight she didn't want to explain. We drove in silence for a few miles, the desert wind pressing against the windows. I found myself glancing at her when I thought she wasn't looking, at the way she tapped her fingers against her thigh in rhythm with the music on the radio, at the small scar near her jawline, at the way she kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead as if searching for something beyond it. "So," I finally asked, breaking the silence, "where are you really going?" Her lips curled into the faintest smile. "Does it matter? Sometimes it's not about where you're headed, it's about who you meet along the way." Her words sat heavy between us, a challenge and an invitation all at once. I swallowed, forcing my attention back to the highway, but I could feel the air shift. It was subtle but undeniable, like a current pulling me somewhere I wasn't sure I wanted to go. By nightfall, the desert had cooled, and I pulled into a small roadside diner with flickering neon lights. "Hungry?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow. "Starving." Inside, the place smelled of burnt coffee and fried onions. The waitress barely looked up as we slid into a booth. Eva ordered with an ease that suggested she'd done this 1,000 times before. 2 burgers, extra fries, black coffee. I laughed when she handed me half her plate without asking, as though sharing was something that came naturally to her. "You look like someone who doesn't stay in one place too long," she said between bites. I tilted my head, unsure how much I wanted to reveal. Maybe I like the idea of moving before anyone figures me out. She studied me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Or maybe you're afraid of being seen." The words hit harder than I expected, and I looked away, pretending to focus on the jukebox in the corner. But Eva didn't press. She just sipped her coffee, waiting for me to answer a question I wasn't ready to face. When we got back in the truck, the air felt heavier. The silence wasn't empty, it was charged. I could feel her presence beside me, her arm brushing mine every time the truck swayed. It was maddening how aware I was of her, how every small movement set my pulse racing. The highway stretched dark and endless, broken only by the pale glow of the moon. At one point, Eva leaned back, resting her head against the seat, and asked softly, "Why'd you stop for me?" I gripped the wheel tighter. "I don't know. Maybe I was just tired of being alone." She turned her face toward me, those green eyes glinting in the dim light. "Maybe you were waiting for me." The words made my chest tighten. I didn't answer, because how could I? I barely knew her. And yet, part of me felt like I did, like I'd been waiting for this stranger longer than I cared to admit. By the time we pulled into a deserted rest stop, exhaustion had caught up to me. I killed the engine, and the sudden silence was deafening. Eva stretched, her shirt pulling slightly, revealing the line of her collarbone. My breath caught before I could stop it. "Looks like we're here for the night," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She leaned closer, her face inches from mine, and for a moment I thought she might kiss me right there in the darkness. Instead, she smiled, slow and knowing. "Good. I like the idea of being stranded with you." Her words sank deep, stirring something I hadn't let myself feel in years. I turned away, pretending to rummage through my bag, but my heart was hammering. That night, as we sat side by side under the vast desert sky, I realized something terrifying and undeniable. Meeting Eva wasn't an accident. It was the beginning of something forbidden, something I wasn't sure I had the strength to resist. And deep down, I knew I didn't want to. The desert had a way of stripping away illusions. Out there, beneath a blanket of stars, there was nowhere to hide. No crowded sidewalks, no small talk to cover the silence. Just me, Eva, and the hum of cicadas echoing across the still air. We sat outside the truck at the edge of the rest stop, our backs against the metal, legs stretched out in the dust. Eva had pulled a small flask from her bag, taking slow sips before offering it to me. The burn of whiskey hit my throat, sharp and unrelenting, but it did something to loosen the knots inside my chest. "You don't seem like the type who picks up strangers," she said, tilting her head toward me. "I don't," I admitted. "But you didn't feel like a stranger." Her smile curved slightly, but her eyes stayed serious. "Careful. That kind of thinking gets people in trouble." I didn't know if she was warning me or herself. Maybe both. But the way she looked at me, steady, unblinking, made my stomach twist in ways I couldn't explain. The night grew colder, and I offered her one of the blankets from the truck. Instead of wrapping it around herself, she spread it across both our shoulders, pulling me closer. Her arm brushed mine, warm and deliberate, and I felt my pulse quicken. "You ever feel like you've been living someone else's life?" she asked suddenly. Her words caught me off guard. "All the time," I confessed. "It's like I've been playing a role. Doing what's expected, never what I actually want." Eva nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "That's why I left. I couldn't stand pretending anymore." I wanted to ask her what she was running from, but something told me not to push. Instead, I let the silence stretch, letting the crackle of her unspoken truth hang between us. At some point, I drifted into half-sleep, my head tipping toward her shoulder. I startled awake when I felt her hand brush mine. Not by accident this time, but intentional, her fingers curling slightly as if asking permission. I didn't pull away. We sat like that, our hands barely linked, while the night wrapped itself around us. It should have felt dangerous, reckless. But it didn't. It felt inevitable. When the first streaks of dawn painted the sky, Eva whispered, or rather, spoke so softly it felt like she was confessing a secret. "You make me feel like I'm not running anymore." The words lodged in my chest. Before I could respond, she leaned in closer, and I thought she was about to kiss me. My breath caught, anticipation tightening every nerve. But just as quickly, she pulled back, shaking her head with a half-laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I shouldn't," she muttered. "You don't know me." Frustration prickled through me, but I didn't push. I just said, "Maybe I'd like to." The rest of the morning was quieter. We packed up, got back on the road, and let the miles roll beneath us. Eva hummed along to the radio, her voice surprisingly melodic, filling the space with something that felt both comforting and haunting. I wanted to ask her about the songs she knew, about the places she'd been, but I didn't. I was afraid of breaking whatever fragile thread tied us together. By midday, we pulled into a small town with one gas station and a diner. While I filled up the truck, Eva went inside. When she returned, she handed me a coffee and a cinnamon roll, her grin lighter than I'd seen before. "For the road," she said. That small act hit me harder than it should have. I wasn't used to someone thinking about me, not like that. As we drove, the conversation flowed more easily. She told me bits and pieces of her life. A childhood in Montana, a father she never forgave, jobs she walked away from without looking back. But always there were gaps. Places she skimmed over, truths she kept hidden. At one point I asked, "Why were you out there hitchhiking alone?" Her expression shifted, her jaw tightening. "Because sometimes you have to leave everything behind before it destroys you." I wanted to reach for her hand again, but the moment passed. Instead, I just nodded, accepting her silence as much as her words. That evening, as the sun dipped low, we found another place to stop, a roadside motel with peeling paint and a flickering sign. It was the kind of place most people would avoid, but for us, it was shelter. Inside the room, there were 2 narrow beds covered with scratchy blankets. Eva dropped her backpack on one and looked at me, her smile tinged with mischief. "You snore." I laughed. "Not that I know of." "You." She shook her head, and for the first time, she looked almost shy. That vulnerability cracked something open in me, something I'd been holding back since the moment she stepped into my truck. As we settled in, the air felt charged again. She sat on the edge of her bed, pulling her hair back, and I couldn't stop staring. She caught me, her lips curving into that knowing smile. "Careful, Claire. You keep looking at me like that, and I might forget all my reasons for staying away." The words struck me like lightning. My chest tightened, my breath shallow, and I felt the ground shift beneath us. Because in that moment, I knew exactly what I wanted. But before I could move, before I could say anything, there was a knock on the door. But unexpected, jarring. We froze, our eyes locking, the weight of everything unsaid crashing between us. Who could it be, out here in the middle of nowhere? And what did they want with us? The knock reverberated through the thin motel walls, sharp and insistent, like someone trying to break the fragile cocoon Eva and I had built around ourselves. My pulse shot up instantly. She looked at me, eyes wide, a mix of alarm and calculation flashing across her face. For a split second, I thought she might bolt. "Don't move," she said quietly, her voice low but firm. She crept toward the door, her body tense like a cornered animal. I wanted to stop her, to say it wasn't safe, but the words stuck in my throat. I stayed frozen on the bed, listening as she pressed her ear to the door. Another knock. Louder this time. "Who is it?" Eva called, her voice steady, though I could hear the edge beneath it. A man's voice replied. "Management. Just checking on the room." Eva's shoulders stiffened, and she turned to me with a look that told me she didn't believe him. Something in her eyes made me realize she was used to danger, used to expecting the worst. She cracked the door open, just enough to peer outside. A shadow loomed, but before anything else could happen, she slammed it shut and threw the deadbolt across. "What was that?" I asked, standing now, my own adrenaline kicking in. "Not management," she said flatly, pacing the room. "They don't knock like that. They don't linger like that." I swallowed hard. "Then who?" She didn't answer, but the way her jaw tightened told me she knew, or at least suspected. The silence between us was heavy, loaded with all the questions I didn't dare ask. Finally, she sank onto the bed opposite mine, her head in her hands. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked less like a woman in control and more like someone barely holding it together. "Eva," I said softly, moving closer, "what's going on?" She looked up at me, her eyes burning. "I left someone behind. Someone who doesn't let go easily." The pieces started falling into place. The way she avoided talking about her past, the edge in her voice whenever I asked why she was traveling alone. There was more to her story, something dangerous enough to follow her here. Before I could respond, another knock rattled the door. This time it was softer, almost mocking. My chest tightened. Eva stood abruptly, her voice sharp now. "We're leaving. Pack your stuff." We shoved our belongings back into bags in a frantic rush, the silence broken only by the creak of floorboards and the occasional pounding at the door. When we slipped out the back window into the cool night air, my heart was pounding so loudly I swore it would give us away. We ran across the gravel lot toward the truck, our breaths ragged. Eva kept glancing over her shoulder, as though expecting a shadow to leap out at us. By the time we slammed the doors shut and the engine roared to life, I could barely feel my hands from the adrenaline. We drove in silence for miles, the empty highway stretching ahead like a lifeline. Only when the neon glow of the motel had long disappeared in the rearview mirror did Eva finally speak. "I didn't want you involved in this," she said quietly. "I shouldn't have let you." Her words stung, though I knew she was trying to protect me. "You don't get to decide that. I chose to be here." She looked at me, her face illuminated by the dashboard lights, and for once she didn't argue. She just nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the truth between us. Hours passed, the road endless, until exhaustion forced us to stop again, this time at a truck stop buzzing with people. It felt safer, less isolated. Inside the diner, we slid into a booth, the fluorescent lights harsh but grounding. Eva stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, her shoulders hunched, eyes distant. I reached across the table, my fingers brushing hers. "You can tell me," I said softly. She hesitated, then finally let out a breath. "I was with someone for years. Controlling, jealous, dangerous. When I left, I thought I was free. But men like him, they don't stop. He's been following me." The weight of her confession settled over us. I felt anger rise in me, not at her, but at the man who thought he could still control her. "You're not alone anymore," I said firmly. "Not if you don't want to be." For the first time that night, her expression softened. She reached for my hand fully, gripping it tight. The contact sent a surge through me, something more than attraction, deeper than desire. It was trust. But just as the moment settled between us, a figure walked into the diner. Eva saw him before I did. Her entire body went rigid, her hand slipping from mine. He was tall, broad-shouldered, scanning the room with eyes that made my stomach drop. She ducked her head, whispering urgently, "That's him." I turned to look, my chest tightening. He hadn't seen us yet, but it was only a matter of time. Eva's hand found mine under the table again, this time trembling. "We have to go," she said. But before we could move, his gaze landed on us. A slow, chilling smile spread across his face as he started walking toward our booth. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, but I couldn't look away. The road had brought us together, but it had also brought her past crashing into our present. And now, sitting under the harsh diner lights with her hand gripping mine, I knew the Real journey was only beginning. The diner's hum faded into silence the moment his eyes locked on ours. Plates clattered in the background, conversations continued at other tables, but to me, everything narrowed to the sound of his boots striking the floor with measured certainty. Each step he took toward us was a reminder that Eva's past wasn't just a shadow, it had a face, a body, and a terrifying persistence. Eva's hand tightened around mine beneath the table, her nails digging into my skin. It wasn't pain I felt, it was urgency, fear transmitted through her trembling grip. I glanced at her, and in that brief look, I saw her mask crack. The confident, self-reliant woman who had always seemed untouchable now looked exposed, fragile. He stopped at the edge of our booth, leaning down slightly, his broad frame blocking out the harsh diner lights. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Eva," he drawled, his voice dripping with something that felt like poison. "You didn't think I'd find you, did you?" Her jaw clenched, her gaze fixed on the table. "Leave me alone, Mark." So now I had a name for the storm that had followed us across miles of asphalt. Mark chuckled, sliding into the booth across from us without an invitation. I could smell the alcohol on his breath even from across the table. His presence made the air heavy, suffocating. "You know I don't like games," he said, tilting his head. "Running away like that? With her?" His eyes cut to me, sharp and assessing, like I was nothing more than collateral in his twisted obsession. My instinct was to speak up, to defend her, but Eva's hand clamped down harder on mine. Her silent plea told me, not yet. The waitress appeared at our table, oblivious to the tension thickening the air. "Coffee for you?" she asked brightly. Mark smiled at her, The kind of smile that might fool someone who didn't know better. Sure. Black. Eva exhaled shakily once the waitress left. Mark, this isn't your life anymore. I told you that. His smile vanished, replaced by something darker. He leaned in close. You don't get to decide when it's over. You belong with me. You always have. My chest burned at his words, anger clawing up my throat. She doesn't belong to anyone, I said before I could stop myself. His eyes snapped to me, icy and full of contempt. And who are you? Some roadside distraction? I held his gaze, refusing to shrink back. I'm the one sitting here with her. That should tell you enough. For a moment, I thought he might reach across the table and strike me. His hand twitched, but he pulled it back, curling his fingers into a fist against his thigh. The waitress returned with his coffee, placing it gently in front of him, unaware of the storm she'd interrupted. He muttered a thank you and waited until she walked away before lowering his voice again. You think this is over? He asked, his tone low and menacing. Eva, you can run, you can hide, but you'll always be mine. Something inside Eva shifted then. Her back straightened, her shoulders squaring as though she'd finally reached the point where fear gave way to resolve. No, she said firmly, her voice clear. I'm not yours anymore. The silence that followed was heavy, charged. My heart pounded against my ribs. Mark leaned back slowly, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Then, with a sudden laugh, he slid out of the booth. This isn't finished, he said, pointing a finger at both of us. Not by a long shot. He walked out of the diner, leaving the door to slam shut behind him. For several moments, neither Eva nor I spoke. The diner's hum returned, conversations around us resuming as though nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Eva's hand slipped from mine, and she pressed her palms against her eyes, shaking. I reached across the table, pulling her hands away gently. Hey, I said softly. You don't have to face him alone anymore. Tears shimmered in her eyes, though she fought to hold them back. You don't understand. He's dangerous. He doesn't stop. Then neither do we, I replied, my voice stronger than I felt. We'll find a way. Her gaze lingered on mine, searching for something, maybe doubt, maybe fear, but all I could give her was the certainty that had been growing inside me since the moment we met. I wasn't going to let her go through this without me. We left the diner shortly after, climbing back into the truck, the night pressing down around us. Eva drove in silence for a long time, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. I didn't push her to talk. I just sat close, letting the quiet settle between us like a fragile truce. Finally, she spoke, her voice raw. I've never told anyone the whole story. About him. About what he did to me. You don't have to tell me until you're ready, I said gently. Her lips curved into a sad smile. That's the thing. With you, I want to. The miles slipped by as she began to speak, her words halting at first but soon spilling out. Stories of control disguised as love, of fear masquerading as loyalty. The more she revealed, the more I realized how much she had carried alone. By the time she finished, the sky was beginning to lighten at the edges, dawn breaking against the horizon. She looked exhausted, but also lighter somehow, like sharing the weight had freed her just a little. We'll figure this out, I promised as we pulled into another quiet motel, the world around us painted in soft hues of morning. Eva glanced at me, her expression torn between fear and hope. What if he finds us again? I reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. Then we'll face him together. Her eyes lingered on mine, and in that charged silence, the unspoken truth between us grew undeniable. But before either of us could act on it, a shadow passed across the window of our room, the unmistakable outline of a man standing just outside. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. The shadow outside our window froze both of us in place. My breath caught, my mind racing through possibilities, but deep down I knew who it was. Mark hadn't let us go. Not after the diner, not after Eva finally told him she wasn't his anymore. Eva moved first, pulling me behind her as if she could shield me from the storm she had lived through for years. Her hand trembled in mine, but her eyes were fierce, burning with a kind of courage that only comes when you've had enough of being afraid. A heavy knock shook the thin door. "Eva," his voice called, calm but menacing, "you can't run forever." Eva swallowed hard, then whispered to me, "Stay behind me. No matter what." But I couldn't just stand back. I shook my head. "No. We're in this together." Her eyes softened at that, and for the briefest moment, a flicker of something more than fear passed between us, something like love, fragile but undeniable. The knock came again, louder this time. Eva squared her shoulders and unlocked the door just enough to open it a crack. Mark's figure loomed in the doorway, the first rays of dawn slicing across his face, twisting his expression into something monstrous. "Let me in," he demanded, trying to push past her. Eva stood her ground. "No, Mark. It's over." His eyes darkened. "You think she's going to save you?" he sneered, jerking his chin toward me. "She doesn't know you like I do." "I don't need her to save me," Eva shot back, her voice shaking but strong. "I'm saving myself." That broke something in him. He lunged forward, but Eva shoved him back with all her strength. In the chaos, I grabbed my phone, dialing the police with trembling fingers. My voice cracked as I gave the motel's address, praying they would come fast enough. Mark pounded against the door again, fury spilling out in every strike. Eva turned to me, her chest heaving. "When this is over, we're not running anymore. Do you understand? No more hiding." I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. "We'll build something real. Together." Her hand brushed my cheek, tender despite the storm raging outside. "I never thought I could feel this again," she whispered, "not after everything." "But you—" Her words were cut short as the doorframe cracked under Mark's weight. Then sirens wailed in the distance. For the first time all night, hope sparked. Mark froze, realizing the sound meant his time was up. His eyes met Eva's one last time, a mix of rage and defeat, before he turned and bolted across the parking lot. Minutes later, flashing lights painted the motel walls red and blue. Officers chased him down, their voices barking commands until the night finally swallowed his presence. Inside the room, Eva collapsed onto the bed, her body shaking as the weight of it all came crashing down. I sat beside her, wrapping my arms around her, letting her bury her face in my shoulder. "It's over," I murmured, though part of me still felt the echoes of his presence. "You're free now." She pulled back, her eyes searching mine, raw and vulnerable. "I don't even know how to be free anymore." I cupped her face, forcing her to see the truth I felt in my bones. "Then we'll learn together. 1 mile, 1 morning, 1 moment at a time." The sunlight streamed through the cracked blinds, bathing her face in gold. For the first time since I met her, she didn't look haunted, she looked alive. She leaned in, pressing her forehead against mine, and in that fragile closeness, I felt everything we had survived, everything we were building. When her lips finally met mine, it wasn't rushed or desperate. It was steady, certain, filled with the promise of something new. Love, fragile but fierce, born out of danger but blooming into possibility. We stayed like that until the knock at the door came again, this time gentle. An officer letting us know it was safe, that Mark was in custody. Eva thanked him, her voice steady, then turned back to me with a look that said more than words ever could. Later, as we drove away from that motel, the road stretched endlessly ahead of us. The fear still lingered in the rearview mirror, but so did something else, hope. Eva reached across the seat, taking my hand in hers. "I don't know where this road leads," she said quietly, "but I want you there with me." I squeezed her hand, my chest swelling with emotion. "Always." The highway opened wide, sunlight breaking through the clouds, guiding us forward. For the first time, it didn't feel like we were running. It felt like we were choosing. And as the miles disappeared beneath our wheels, I realized that forbidden or not, love on the road had given me more than I ever thought possible. It had given me her.